In this flip video, we're going to learn about the history of labor unions. After watching this video, you're going to be able to answer 4 essential questions. Number 1, why were labor unions needed? Number 2, who were Terence Powderly and Samuel Gompers? Number 3, how are the AFL and the Knights of Labor similar and different? Number 4, what was the Haymarket Riot? After you watch this video, please answer these questions in your head or in your notebook. In the early 1900s, workers were not well treated. Child workers worked long hours in unsafe conditions with very little pay. Women also worked in very unsafe conditions and were given also very little pay. People who were injured on the job were given no compensation and actually were often fired for their injuries. As you can see from these pictures, it was not good to be a worker in the early 1900s. These workers needed to do something. So eventually they came together and formed labor unions. The labor unions asked for 8 hours of work time. Before labor unions, many people worked 12, 14, even 16 hours a day. Labor unions insisted that people work an 8-hour workday. They said 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and then 8 hours for leisure, reading, cleaning, other activities. As you can see from both of these pictures, 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, and 8 hours rest was a common theme for early labor unions. One of the earliest labor unions was the Knights of Labor. The Knights of Labor was the first important national labor organization in the United States. It was founded in 1869 by Uriah Smith Stevens. It started as a secret organization meant to protect its workers from horrible bosses. Here's a picture of some of the first members of the Knights of Labor. You can tell by what they're holding that they are tradesmen. This one's holding a hammer, a wrench. So these are skilled workers in various trades. So the Knights of Labor was one of the very first unions that started in order to get people that 8-hour workday. As the Knights of Labor grew, they also changed. This was mainly due to one of the most important leaders of the Knights of Labor, Terence Powderly. Terence Powderly wanted to ensure that skilled, unskilled, African American, and women workers were all involved in the Knights of Labor. You can see right here, these women are all wearing ribbons that say Knights of Labor. So these women were allowed to be in this labor union, as were African Americans and unskilled workers. Terence Powderly fought for an 8-hour workday, an end to child labor, and equal opportunities for women. You can see from this political cartoon here that Terence Powderly is trying to protect the workers from employers or bosses, but also from scabs. Scabs are people who do not join the labor union and instead will work for a lower price than the union members. So Terence Powderly allowed anyone to join the union, and he protected those workers from scabs and employers. The Knights of Labor lost some of their power in 1886 with the Haymarket Riot. After this Haymarket Riot, many people started to see labor unions as violent. As you can see from this cartoon, which I'll read to you, the effects of the Haymarket Riot were that many people started to dislike unions. So I'm going to start reading in this first cartoon here. Strikes were becoming more and more common because of the low wages and poor working conditions. Most of the labor radicals were immigrants who were communists and anarchists who opposed the capitalist system because it exploited workers. The day before the Haymarket Riot, a strike took place at McCormick Reaper Works. The workers on strike demanded an 8-hour workday. However, the police then showed up to break up the riot, which resulted in the death and injury of several of the workers on strike. On May 4th, 1886, a rally was then organized by labor radicals at the Haymarket Square to protest the killings of the workers that had been killed the day before. Towards the end of the rally, Chicago policemen showed up in attempts to disperse the crowd of people. As the police advanced into the crowd, an individual threw a bomb directed at the police. As a result of the bomb being thrown, the police and other people opened fire and chaos ensued. 7 police officers and 1 civilian were killed, and many were injured during the riot. In August of 1886, 8 men labeled as anarchists were convicted in a controversial trial. The trial was controversial because the jury supposedly convicted the men with no solid evidence and biased opinions. Judge Joseph E. Gary gave 7 of the men death sentences, and the 8th man was given 15 years in prison. On November of 1887, 4 of the men were hanged. So if you see in this picture, these are all members of the Knights of Labor. And they were protesting because earlier there had been a strike that ended in a riot where there was the death and injury of some workers. So they were protesting the death of apparently this cartoon guy. But no one remembers really this cartoon man who was killed the day before. Everyone just remembers that these Knights of Labor, men and women, gathered together to protest this killing. But during that protest, someone threw a bomb at the police officers. That is what the Haymarket riot is remembered for, that the Knights of Labor threw a bomb. After this riot, many people hated labor unions, and many people even refused to join them. So as we see, the Haymarket riot took place in 1886. Workers from the McCormick Harvester Company protested the killings of 4 strikers. That's what happened the day prior to the riot. During the riot, a bomb killed a police officer and several others during the riot. Some Americans began to associate labor unions with violence and disorder. They started to use words like anarchist. An anarchist is someone who wants no rules or laws. They also began to call labor unionist communist. A communist is someone who does not believe in democracy. So these words, anarchist, communist, violence, were all used to describe labor unions after the Haymarket riot of 1886. This is a famous painting of the Haymarket riot. Over here you can see the bomb that was thrown and some of the police officers going down over here. People running away here, this man shooting, and here are some of the union members. And they all, if you see, look like they're yelling and angry and shooting. Here are the 8 police officers who were killed in this riot. In Chicago, there is a statue, it looks just like this, to celebrate those police officers who were killed at the Haymarket riot. It's the fallen heroes of the Chicago Haymarket Affair, May 4th, 1886. And here are the names of all 8 police officers who were killed that day. There is obviously nothing said about the workers who were killed the day before or the worker who was killed during the strike and during the riot. Another labor union was the AFL, the American Federation of Labor. Its founder was Samuel Gompers. He founded the AFL in 1886. Samuel Gompers wanted to move away from strikes, and he wanted to use collective bargaining to negotiate with businesses for higher wages, better working conditions. So he wanted to move away from violence and move towards negotiations. The AFL was the start of skilled labor unions. Unlike the Knights of Labor, people in the AFL had to have a skill. They had to be carpenters, plumbers. They had to be skilled workers. The AFL was not a union that accepted everyone as the Knights of Labor did. Unions still exist today. The Buffalo teachers are a union. If you see here, I am in this union. This is my union president, Phil Moore. If you see right here, this is Mr. Foster, who teaches downstairs at Lafayette. There's Miss Wallace, and there's Mr. Conley. You may see a few other teachers that you recognize here. These teachers all work together in a union in order to get better working conditions. And you see some of the signs, millions for our kids, not for charter schools. The Buffalo Public Teachers Union is against charter schools because charter schools take money away from public schools. And you see down here, this is just last year. These are the teachers all working together and wearing signs telling everyone they want a new contract now. So even though labor unions seem like ancient history to us, they really are still very current. So now I want you to take out a piece of paper and I want you to try to answer these questions. Why were unions needed? Who were Terence Powderly and Samuel Gompers? How were the AFL and the Knights of Labor similar and different? What was the Haymarket Riot? Feel free to rewind this video, watch it as many times as you want. If there's a question that you don't know, write it down or just come to me tomorrow morning and ask. But please watch this video at least once, maybe twice, in order to be able to answer these 4 essential questions. Because remember, the history of labor unions is still relevant today.